Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to everyone west of Saskatchewan tuning in. Thank you for joining us today for today's Tech Sector Pulse Check. I'm Benjamin Bergen, the President of the Council of Canadian Innovators, and it's a pleasure to welcome such a diverse and engaged group of innovators and thought leaders. For those of you not familiar with CCI, we're a member-driven organization that's nonpartisan, with over 175 Canadian technology scale-ups that are part of our association. And we advocate for strategies on how to build a better Canadian tech ecosystem to help promote prosperity, wealth, and Canada's future. We've been doing this for over 10 years, and I must say that the moment right now has sort of never been greater for the work that we've done and the level of engagement that we've had. This session comes at a crucial time for our sector. As many of you are aware, or all of you are aware, we are navigating a landscape marked by uncertainty, with the federal election underway and yesterday's announcement of a 25% tariff on Canadian steel, aluminum, and automobiles, not to mention the 10% baseline tariff on imports not covered by CUSMA. These changes bring both challenges and opportunities, and today we're fortunate enough to have a group of exceptional CEOs from across the country to share their insights on how they're adapting and scaling their businesses amidst these shifting conditions. As we get started, I want to remind everyone that this session is meant to be interactive, so please feel free to ask questions throughout. We want to make this an engaging experience and one where we can share our practical knowledge. These types of conversations in the real world help us at CCI do the work that we do to engage governments and put forward the best positions to help strengthen Canada's innovation economy. Before we dive into today's discussion, I also just want to take a moment to remind everyone about the upcoming Capital Growth Summit on May 2nd in Toronto. It'll be a fantastic opportunity to connect with other industry leaders, explore key areas of growth strategies, and discuss pressing issues like tariffs, accessing capital, and more. I encourage all of you to mark your calendars and join us for that in-person event, which is taking place again on May 2nd. Now let's get into the conversation. As I mentioned, we've got a great group of CEOs from right across the country that are joining us. I'll quickly first introduce them, and then we'll jump into the conversation. So starting all the way out furthest in the west, we've got Sean, the CEO of Forage Robotics. Hey, Sean, I know you do have to jump a little bit early. I think you've got some planes to catch and are out potentially going to raise some capital. So look forward to hearing your thoughts on that. We've got Nic, CEO of Helcim, who is headquartered in Calgary. Nic, thanks for joining us. Moving further east as we go, we've got Senna, CEO of Conscia, and we also have Craig, the CEO of ThinkOn. So thank you both for joining us today for today's conversation. Moving over to the French and wonderful province of Quebec, we've got Hélène joining us, the CEO of PharmBD. And then representing the Atlantic region and Gina, it's great to see you. I think it's been twice in the last couple of days. So great to have Gina join us, the CEO of Genoa Design. So thank you folks for joining us right across the country on this. So yeah, great. So as maybe kind of a first question, Sean, I'm going to kick it to you. One, just obviously your time constraint, but also you're right now in the middle of raising. Maybe give folks a sense of sort of how tariffs in this position is playing out for yourself.
Yeah, so I think a few themes have come up in as we kind of get into the early phases of fundraising for our company here with respect to tariffs. One is a question that everyone asks. Two is I think my initial fear when we got into the back and forth over tariffs, particularly the highlight of animosity of a hockey game, is like, is this actually going to damage relations from citizen to citizen? Is that going to really close up markets in the US? That hasn't been an issue at all for us. Like, we've had really strong response from US funds. We're raising our Series B, so it's likely that it probably comes from the US, and there's been a ton of interest from funds there as well. So I think that at a first glance, I'd say relationships between VCs in the US and Canadian companies is really high. And then the piece that's worked out well for us, and sorry, of course, announcements come on just as I'm speaking, but the piece that's worked out well for us in the conversation of tariffs is we didn't follow the typical Canadian playbook of build a product and then focus on getting into the US market as fast as possible. Now, we do have customers in the US. We have customers in Australia, the Netherlands, Ireland, Canada. And so we have a bit of a luxury of being able to focus on markets as they open or close. which has allowed us to navigate that question with VCs fairly elegantly. So I think that that's been one saving grace for us. And then the other big piece is like, I don't think they expect you to have the perfect answer right now. Like we've tried to put together, a memo on giving our thoughts around tariff that we're putting into the data room and the different optionality we have as a business. I think anything more than that is just overkill from a timing perspective, given that things seem to be changing on a weekly basis. And maybe we have some more certainty after the big move yesterday, but my gut feeling here is that to go any further than a 1 to 2 page memo on like, here's what we're thinking is kind of a fool's errand with such a changing environment right now. So again, investors in the US still love Canadian companies. That's been super encouraging. The luxury of our business is that our smallest customers need $20 million of our robots and big ones need 100 million. So you can kind of pick a customer anywhere in the world and there's still a good ROI. And then, making sure that you've got a plan, but it doesn't need to be too thought through at this stage, given how much, uncertainty still resides, has been kind of my general view in the last few weeks.
That's been some good color on what it's looking like south of the border in terms of capital and customers. Two big themes that obviously we work to tackle at the council. So thanks Sean for those insights.
Oh, and just one last piece, Ben. And sorry, I think the other piece is like, if this does come in and it does just crush the ROI of buying our robots, the piece that I struggle with as a patriotic Canadian, but also someone who has fiduciary duty to all of my shareholders who are on both sides of the borders, is do we need to start building our robots in the US? And so that's the area that's like, it's in our memo as one of the options, and that piece just like breaks my heart that could actually be the option we have to go down, which feeds right into the overall plan that was put in place too. And so that'd be the piece that gives me the most anxiety these days, is doing exactly what this whole thing was catered to do, and being another company that has to build at least US production for the US market.
Yeah, no, I know that's a question that lots of folks are dealing with, and doing what's right for your business is obviously what's required. Hopefully, we can keep the IP and the real value of it north of the border, though. Sana, I'm going to pass it over to you. You run an AI company. What does things look like for you in terms of your business and how things are playing out?
Yeah, so we're a fully Canadian-owned, Toronto-based technology scale-up that helps global enterprises and even the government of Ontario orchestrate data and APIs across complex digital ecosystems without having to rip and replace their legacy system. So it is, when you look at the name of the company, it's Conscia.ai. We don't build AI, we enable AI across the digital ecosystem. So a lot of the enterprises that have legacy data sources, legacy systems, or even modern systems, our AI enabling technology is really just connecting the dots between all of those various data points and exposing omni-channel digital experiences to citizens and customers alike. We have Ontario as one of our customers, Ontario government, as well as various large and small enterprises in Europe and the US. So luckily, like Sean was saying as well, we have been able to diversify our market a little bit. In fact, most of our customers are within Canada and Europe, and a few customers in the US. So this doesn't hurt us directly as much. But really the worry here is if we do want to do more work within the US, is one thing we know for sure from President Trump here is that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So today, yes, we don't have tariffs to worry about on the digital services and digital products, but is that going to be the case tomorrow? And there's sufficient confusion, I would say, within the American market about what do these tariffs actually apply to? So just that confusion alone can start to have a very negative impact on our businesses, even if there's nothing happening right now. Just the uncertainty of it can play havoc in our industry as well. So my perspective is, really we as a country and as a nation need to also do a better job to clarify and clean that messaging up a little bit around tariffs. Like, what exactly is this affecting? So if it's not affecting us, don't let it affect us just yet, but also keep in mind that it can start to affect us tomorrow.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And I think one of the pieces we keep thinking about is how the paralysis itself actually leads to a lot of the issues as well, where if folks are not making decisions and not continuing to move their businesses forward because of fear and uncertainty, that has a multiplying effect in terms of its, our ability as an economy to really respond to it. So great points there. Gina, I'm gonna pull you in on the conversation piece around like procurement, and we had some really good conversations when I was out in St. John's last week, and we obviously had a bit of fun as well with the social that happened there. Talk to us maybe a little bit about sort of what you're experiencing in this moment, and how it relates to the firm that you're building.
Right. So we largely work in the defense and security space. And so this moment puts us in an interesting position in a couple of ways. And there's a lot of firms like ours working in this space in Atlantic Canada. We haven't been directly affected by tariffs. Things are still flowing and happening. We're worried, of course, in terms of, so we build data, and we would work with a company like Sanas to explore how to leverage that data into new usefulness. But we're in the business of exchanging services, which are database services, and using technologies to do so. And so the tariffs haven't hit that sector yet, but we're wondering when it will. And trying to stay alert. And I would have to agree with Sean's comment that we don't want to overreact at this. We don't want to overreact at this point and over panic about what could happen. However, knowing that something could happen in this space. But I would say for anyone working in areas related to defense and security, one of the worries is how this trade war will spill over into a defense piece. And it's tough. We've got a lot of customers in the US, and we have to honor and respect those relationships. And there's a huge demand as defense priorities increase, as the Arctic sovereignty becomes more and more of a driver in this equation. We're looking for those partnerships to be even more solid. And so, I think there's a lot to consider there to keep current things going, to understand how this trade war is having impacts. And it certainly will affect defense programming in Canada, because we buy a lot of products from the US and vice versa. But what's it going to mean for defense relationships, because we are still such a connected North America?
Yeah, figuring out where also, as defense dollars begin to flow in Europe and here as well, how do we help capture some of that opportunity? I think, was a big piece of the conversations that we had, Gina, as well. So making sure that we're continuing to monitor and figure out how do we help plug in domestic firms into, I think, these procurement pieces is a part of the work that we'll be doing at the council as things continue to unfold. Nic.
If I could just add just a tiny bit to that, Ben. I think Canadian procurement, which has been often seen as quite weak in terms of buying from Canadian innovators and Canadian companies, is now it's an absolute priority. And those of us involved in that mix are recommending that, not recommending, we're pushing it really hard, that this is the time for Canada to have the courage of Canadian procurement and the risk appetite as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. And to maybe sort of double down on that, one of the things that we're really trying to ensure at the council is that it's not just the language of the political class, that it's actually being followed through on, announcements around things like, defense and sovereignty. If they're not plugged into that economic narrative of us actually being, the owners and the sellers of those products, a lot of it's, it's sort of cheap lip service, if you will. Nic, I'm still going to come back to you. So. Talk to us about your experience, obviously, with what's been going on. Full disclosure, folks, CCI membership dues are now paid through Helcim, and we moved over from Stripe to Helcim because it's a better product, and it also has the benefit of being Canadian as well. So, Nic, on that, jump into it.
I love the plug, by the way, Ben, so I appreciate it. For us, I'll talk super quickly about our business. So 100% Canadian operated, all in Calgary, all of our team is there, but 2/3 of our business actually comes from the States, right? So, it makes us really diversified. What we've seen so far is Canadians are even more supportive, which is wonderful. We've seen those numbers rise, but we haven't seen a pullback from the American side. I mean, if you think about it, you have half that country that is actually being super supportive, that actually, if anything, in defiance of their current government, wants to help you out, right? And it's such a massive country that it actually, in itself, represents 150 million people market. So we're not worried about there as much. The Taiwan tariffs that were announced yesterday are annoying, to say the least. We deal with hardware. If you think about our smart terminals, which we manufacture them in Taiwan. Almost all payment terminals in the markets are manufactured in either in China, Taiwan, or Vietnam, and all those tariffs went up way up. So you expect the price from Helcim machines to Square to Clover to kind of go up. Yeah, I mean, the whole market's going to be subject to it. So it's just more unfortunate for the small businesses that are going to ultimately end up paying the price on that, right? I think taking a step back, you mentioned earlier in terms of the fear of Canadians getting into a paralysis because, you don't know what's going on and you don't know exactly what the right move is. I think it's a normal reaction, but I would say this is our moment to start building a audacious vision of what Canada can be. I mean, I think really getting on the bullish side, like a tariff, or sorry, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And that doesn't take away from all the hardship that we will experience and people will experience. And we got to think about how we can help our fellow Canadians through that. But I really think that we can turn this into a moment for ourselves. I think we can have a reverse brain drain back to Canada, not just from the US, but from all places that people are looking for a better life, saying, yeah, but this is, we have such a wonderful foundation of safety, of the rule of law, of want a place to raise a family. I think we can have a reverse brain drain come to us. I think we can become a technology powerhouse. I think we already are. We just keep kind of selling too quickly. We have, we are the grandfathers of AI. We are the grandfathers of so many wonderful technologies. I think we can become a data infrastructure, superpower. I think we have everything that all the ingredients, all the resources, all the climate, everything for that to happen. So I think that there's an audacious vision here when you think about Canada in 2050, that we could become, the country that the world goes to when it needs to solve really big problems. And
I would just like to add, Nic,
ahead.
I love what you just said, and I want to double down on that. I think that there is this element of trust that Canadians have, and Canadian companies have on a global stage, that at this point, I think the US companies are losing, not because they're at fault, but who's leading them is. And so that is going to trickle down to their companies, and that is our opportunity, right?
100%.
Where we can rise and be the trusted party for various companies or countries in the world.
I think trust it's an important point for you to bring up, because trust is so hard to build, so easy to lose, and takes forever. It takes decades to rebuild. So what's happening with even if they they see the economy tank, it's a game of chicken, and then they reverse everything. It doesn't matter. The damage has been done for the next generation.
Exactly.
And I think that really, to your point, Sarah, the power of brand as a countrywide brand, I think it's our time to lean into it. So I think we just have to shake off the nerves and just be are we going to take the moment and make it happen? And it's our generation. It's right here, right now. Nobody else is going to do it for us. So I'm bullish in the moment. I'll stop talking.
Good. No, that's great. That's great. We need this this enthusiasm, and we also need it to be inclusive of what it means to be Canadian, right? It's got to hold to truth, love, and justice, and democracy, and the things that we as Canadians care about and hold dear. So no, let's be bullish. Let's be bullish on who we are and what we can become. Hélène, I'm going to pass it over to you. You're a leader in the biopharma space. I know you guys have obviously had some challenges around in the ecosystem around things like COVID and other disruptive technologies that have impacted, or experiences that have impacted things like supply chains. Talk to us a little bit about your experience and sort of how you're fortifying and protecting the work that you're doing with your firm.
Thank you, Ben. You know, it's interesting because in the biotech and the biopharma industry, right now we're still holding our breath because tariff-wise, it hasn't hit us. Like we're waiting for next week or so, apparently, you know, always in the air. What is very interesting, though, talking about innovation, is what's happening with DOGE and this censoring of university and free thinking for these brains in the US. USA has been a fantastic success story of innovation, of letting people think, invent, and then translate all that into economic value. This has been the reference worldwide. And all of a sudden, here and there, what I'm hearing is academics from everywhere wanting to come up to Canada, because in Canada, we value intellectual property. We value freedom. We value, you can write a grant and you don't have to censor for keywords. And this is, to me, in the biotech and life science industry, a huge momentum where we see that we have all the ingredients to welcome some of the people that went to the US, first of all. We had a lot of people going to the USA to do research and development and have startups because the capital is there, the money is there. And now they are thinking potentially about coming back to Canada. And of course, we want to welcome these smart people. We have the ingredients. I think we need to double on the recipe, though. We're not ready to welcome all these people and all right now. So it's not just let's do it, let's welcome all these people, because we might have another crisis of capacity. And so this is a very serious momentum happening that needs preparation, that needs to have alignment between private and public institutions to see how do we actually put everything in place to accommodate and welcome and attract these talents, these brains. That's where I am right now.
I completely agree with Hélène. I think with creating and building, there needs to be a balance of selling. You need the markets to sell to. You can bring in all the builders and creators in the world to Canada, but if we don't do enough to create, in terms of creating the market to sell to, and US being one of the biggest markets, and as Nic said and Sean said, this may not get affected in a massive way because at least 150 million out of the 300 million people there do still like us and care about us, and so that's still a pretty big market. But we need to be able to sell to Europe and Australia and everywhere else in the world as well if we are going to welcome these brains into Canada. And the other aspect of it that I want to mention is DEI, right? I mean, there is great disrespect going on right now to DEI in the States. And I think that's also an opportunity for us because some of the smartest people in the world have gone to US to build their careers because of the opportunity that US offers to them. Now we have an opportunity to bring those people here, right at home, and build with us and build for us. I see it as a huge opportunity, but I think we have to move, as Hélène said, extremely carefully because you don't want to do it too quickly when we don't have the capacity to accommodate them. We don't have the markets to sell to. We have to prepare all of that in advance. I saw this ad the other day on CTV. I was very, very disappointed about the move to the US ad. I don't know if you've seen that. It's even on CP24. I think I even saw it. I don't know if I saw it on CBC, but definitely CP24. And I was looking at this going, this is the time that you're going to allow those types of ads to be presented on national television when we're already struggling with the situation. Anyway, yeah.
And I think there's going to be some pressure on some of our institutions. For example, the FDA right now is in big turmoil. FDA is the reference regulatory body in the world. If all of a sudden it's very difficult or unpredictable for biotechs to deposit a dossier, well, the next, North American authority that's closest to FDA is Santé Canada, Health Canada. And so are they ready to actually welcome more dossier, to have pre-NDA meetings, IND meetings? It might be really like pressurizing a system that is built for the Canadian ecosystem. So we need to be cautious with that and to make sure that our own Canadian companies are actually served and growing well within this a little bit of a chaotic environment.
Yeah. No, those are really important pieces, and some of the work that the council did under the first Trump administration was, if folks remember, when there was the Muslim ban, not a Muslim ban, and 8 countries were targeted by the president, and the tech community responded with, no borders in tech, and part of the global talent stream that we helped build with the federal government came out of a realization that people wanted to move here, who do hold the values that we've used to build our civil society. And us at the council, we've been thinking of how do we keep recapturing that momentum. But some of the fundamentals have changed, right? Housing is extremely expensive in most of our cities, and some of the net benefits that we had in the previous iteration of the Trump administration have sadly evaporated. I do think there's been some concerns from the broader public about high levels of immigration, but I don't think that it's necessarily tied to a xenophobia. It's actually tied to a cost of living perspective. So this is some stuff that we definitely have to get ourselves wrapped around. But how do we bring the best and brightest here to help grow our economy? So great points from everyone. I'm going to move it over to you, Craig. You're a leader in cloud in terms of the work that you guys do. Curious on what you guys have been experiencing as a firm from an interest perspective. I often make the reference that things like sovereign cloud and compute is a little bit like the railroad of the building of this country. If we had allowed just foreign multinationals to own our railroad, we wouldn't actually have had much of a country, and if we allowed them to determine what we could put on that railroad. So you're occupying a pretty interesting space right now. Give us a bit of the lay of the land.
It is an interesting space. I will start by saying it saddens me that we're the only ones competing against 7 American organizations at the federal level. There should be 3 Canadian companies doing this. So I look at that and say there's an example of where procurement and leadership failed the ecosystem and really failed the supply chain. I mean, we all had a wake-up call in 2020. We know what supply chain issues look like, but there's this myopic perspective that somehow technology suppliers rise above politics and borders, and it's such a load of it's a mess right now. But the workload, the demands, the conversations are off the charts, but procurement still is a huge issue. It's like, you can go through there's a fear of national security exemptions. I understand that. I think ArriveCan spelled out what that can look like when it goes badly. But we all have to step up right now and really help all levels of government understand that there are great suppliers here. And when we work with domestic suppliers, it makes us as suppliers all better to compete everywhere, including back in the US. It's when you don't get a chance to service the most demanding customers that you fail, because then your own skill sets tend to diminish, right? So the number of interactions right now is, I will say just bluntly, it's crazy. Like, it's 10x what it was 4 months ago. But I still get this impression that there's a lot of people hoping that if they just hum loud enough, it will go back to the way it was. And I feel like there's a lot of people, especially the public sector, who wish for this to not be disruptive to their way of work. And so I think we all represent different aspects of industry, but I think we all have an implication around public sector influence, and we really have to keep telling them and reminding them that this isn't going to revert, because you can't revert to something where it's fundamentally run by someone you cannot trust. And we really need to trade on trust.
I can definitely second that on the procurement front, and in fact have had some major grievances with even just the Ontario government alone in terms of the process for procurement. There's this thing called the vendor of record that you have to, as any company, have to get on to be able to sell to the Ontario government or to any government whatsoever. And that process is quite difficult. Every once in a while you'll see, VOR RFPs come up. They come up every couple of years, and you have to make it just in time to, to get on the VOR, and the process to get on it is just so cumbersome and complicated currently. Yes, it's transparent, but it is complicated. And most of the companies, especially on the digital front, that are on it are US companies, and they are favored currently. So when we're talking about the market that, that we need to expand, let's start with our own Canadian market to begin with. Let's at least give Canadian companies a chance to be suppliers and vendors for our own government that is spending billions of dollars on non-Canadian vendors. By the way, the way they get away with that is that they do have a Canadian entity, and that Canadian entity is really just an office in Canada with a bunch of salespeople that sell to the government, but the actual work happens in the US. So the brain drain has already, in a big way, happened, where our engineers and IT professionals, they have already gone to the US. They are living in the Silicon Valley and Seattle and, these places, and selling essentially their work back to Canada at this point, which is quite sad. Sorry, Gina, you have something to add there.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on this thread, and Benjamin, going back to one of the discussions we had around the table in Newfoundland last week. And Nic mentioned the word brand, and I want to pick up on that, because I think in Canada we've long suffered from our massive geography, and we've often done things politically by jurisdictions and picked our priorities. And I think the ocean, or the superclusters, of which the ocean is the one I'm most interested in, but was a good example of that they were maybe chosen not based thematically as much as they should have been, but more jurisdictionally. And now is the moment to have courage around what our brand really is. What do we do? What do we need to do as a sovereign nation domestically? What capability must reside here in the country for security? And I think when anything that we talk about in terms of data is and security overall is so critical. But then what do we do best from an export value? And I don't think that trust is lost in this. Part of the Canadian identity is trust, and I don't know that we've ever been able to understand what does that actually mean? What value does it bring? But there are some really obvious areas that Canada should be locking down hard on. Healthcare is certainly one of them. Regional services are another. Marine, we've got the longest coastline in the world, is another one, with defense in the Arctic raising in prominence so much. But we need the courage of identifying what the brand is. And I'm not sure there's a Canadian out there that can really articulate what is the brand of Canada right now.
That's a really great point, Gina, around what is that brand. And I think it's folks actually stepping up and coming together to help establish what that looks like. It's participation in these types of conversations. For me, democracy is not a noun, it's a verb. It's something that we have to actually participate in and engage in. And so I think that's a really good element to throw in there. This question's going to be a bit more broad to the whole group, but I think we've been answering elements of it. And Gina, I think that you tie this in nicely. But what does economic sovereignty mean to you as a Canadian tech CEO? And how should government policy reflect that in this moment that we find ourselves in, and that going forward? Before folks jump in to answer that question, do begin those listening to throw your questions into the chat. I've made my font larger so I can read it, and we're good to go. So, Sean, I don't know if maybe you want to answer that one, because I know you've got a flight to catch.
Yeah, I'm boarding in 5 minutes, so I'll jump into that first. But love that question. Look, I think rule number one is we got to figure out how we grow the pie. Like, that's the piece that I think before we get into how we split up the pie, how we use the pie, if we use more than the pie that we have to look after for now, we got to have an approach that grows the pie at the macro level. And so that is, how do we increase our exports as much as possible and lean on our strengths, which, I know it's an uncomfortable topic for a lot of folks, particularly in the tech space, but we have a lot of natural resources. We got to find a way to turn this into money and grow that pie. and then use that money for good. And then I think within our ecosystem and the pie itself, I'm so excited for the capital conference you guys are putting on next month, and I hope everyone here shows up for it. I think that's going to have some fascinating conversations. But we got to rethink the capital that comes into tech companies as well, in the sense that we need to find a way to get more capital into our companies. The government, both provincial and federal, has taken on a huge burden on behalf of our tech ecosystem of just continuing to pump money into us through various funds and investing in funds. And they've been incredible in supporting my company and I think many of the companies across Canada. But how do we get that facilitation of new money into the tech space that really starts to seize? How do we grow that pie as well? And look, I know I don't like making political decisions off tweets, but I love the idea of no capital gains tax on money that's reinvested in Canada. And then if we do something like that, can the Canadian tech ecosystem find a way to capture that money that comes in as well? Like that to me feels like, back to your question of economic sovereignty, that means we can reduce the amount of money we need from the government funds to keep us alive, and that we need from government grants to keep us alive, giving us our own autonomy as a tech ecosystem. So I think those are the two big pieces that are top of my mind. Like I think there's a lot of really cool ideas on how we split up the pie and how we make sure that we have a country that stands behind the values that we all cherish as Canadians, that differentiate us as Canadians. But that pie is just not growing fast enough, and we got to make sure that we have enough for us to use on all these great ideas that we have. And I think that's both at the macro level from a country, as well as specifically in the ecosystem here for the tech space.
That's great. Thanks, Sean. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
I'll jump in on that. I really like the way Sean expressed the point around the helping grow the pie. The pie, there's a domestic pie, and then there's a global pie, and I think that there's a lot to be had from, or the potential to be had from the federal government and maybe some of the provincial governments around helping us get out in front of more buyers to ultimately grow the slice of the pie. Yes, we have to frame ourselves properly. We can't just be saying we're not that guy. But there is a moment in time to be had when you do get meetings and doors get opened that normally might take longer to open. And so this like, I'll give you an example. We've been in this dilemma now for a few weeks. Well, getting meetings with some organizations that could potentially assist and help on certain cases is like the end of April. Yet it's been an urgency for a few weeks, and it's not just my urgency, it's all of our urgency. So I worry that some of the stakeholders in in trade aren't necessarily understanding the implications of taking advantage of the opportunity. We're all worried about what the US is doing. My view is we should be out storming the beaches globally right now to get us started in conversations, because we all know you don't walk anywhere in the world and walk out with an order. That's months of work. But man, we have this accelerating opportunity right now, and I don't know if we're actually telling the government this message clearly enough that time is of the essence to get the conversation started.
Yeah, jump in, Gina.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at Mark's comment there in the chat. He speaks about an industrial strategy, and I couldn't agree with that more. I think if we're talking about government and government policy, what our federal government is going to do, it has to be anchored, and it has to enable strategic priorities and imperatives and decision making to largely sit with that. And I think it's the beginning. It underpins what healthy economic sovereignty looks like. It doesn't exclude anything. I think when we talk about the tech sector, anything should be on the table. If there's a way to improve it, to automate it, to innovate it, anything should be there. But at its base, at its nucleus, we have to know what our strategic priorities are. Otherwise, we're just going to boil the ocean, and we're going to water ourselves down to the point of really not getting anywhere. And I think there's a lot of other countries who are doing that really, really well. And somebody mentions India in there, and I think we're lacking that. And it also impedes the pace of bureaucrats making decisions. I have seen recently from some very senior bureaucrats in procurement that they are moving at a pace I've never seen before. They want to make this happen, but in the absence of being anchored as to what Canada is meant to be doing in this volatile time, they're a little bit impotent in making those decisions quickly, and we need that to happen. And we also need a higher appetite for risk and more empowerment of the bureaucracy to be able to make things move. And I think currently we're just so wishy-washy with making those decisions.
Yeah, I think an element of that is definitely around the fact that we are in a federal election, and some of the decision making about how we begin to kind of chart that path is definitely playing out. Before we jump on to our next question, did anyone else want to respond to kind of the sovereignty component before we maybe dive into the
Maybe I would just add one little part, is that for me also sovereignty is breaking down the barriers between our own provinces and working together as Canadians. I'm in Quebec, so I've never actually seen the Quebec province so Canadian, so aligned with the objectives that we have all together. And there's so much more we can do to work all together. We have just announced Bio-Quebec and BioLife Science in Ontario, a new strategic alliance to just work better together with all the biotech ecosystem. There's a lot more we can do also within that pie, and agreeing with Craig on, like, we need to go out there. We need to really, like, I'm in Japan right now talking from Tokyo, and I was at a summit on energy. Like, all countries are looking for alternatives, and Canada is very well positioned as a fair partner, an equitable partner. Like, people want to work with us. And so it's not like time to tippy-toe around this topic. It's time to do scandalous moves. And I agree with that. We need to be so bold. And I would like to see that more also from our government, by understanding that the campaign is also a little bit of a curveball into the momentum.
Yeah,
I'll just add some. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Nic. That's okay.
Sure. I mean, I think we need to be unapologetic about being Canadian. I think that, yes, our brand is polite and we are trustworthy and we should lean into that. But if you're thinking about, I mean, for us, for example, like our HQ is in Calgary. We love that we're building in Canada. We're not planning to go anywhere, regardless of all the different countries that we're able to export to. I mean, and you get that pressure. You get that pressure from venture, your venture partners saying, "Oh, why don't you hire from the US? Why don't you hire from there?" And so on. And the reality is that there's amazing talent here, and we can grow amazing companies right here. And I think that some of that pressure, it's easy, they bring in big checks, and it's easy for us Canadians to feel smaller and to feel like, oh, maybe that's the best advice, and I should move my manufacturing there, and I should move my HQ there, and so on. And I think we just need to stop apologizing for who we are, and absolutely lean into our strength, and wear as a badge of honor. Like, I think that the world is looking to us right now as the model of how to push back to everything that's happening in this insane trade war. And maybe there's a little element of, like, Canadian, to what we were seen as in World War I, World War II, a certain amount of, like, bravery. Canadians are, yes, they're polite, but they're tough, and they push back and they stand their ground. And I think that works in our favor right now. And we should lean into those values and just be unapologetic about just who we are and our boldness.
It's funny, that's exactly what I was going to start with as well. But just to, basically add to what you're saying, Nic, as well, we really need to, as Canadians, we're polite. We don't like to sell ourselves too hard, because we think that that's, not nice to do that. It's too bold or whatever. But now is the time to take advantage of all of the things that are on the table. For example, our brand. Like Gina, you were saying, what is our brand? I think one thing that's very clear is that we care about our people. We care about DEI. We care about things that south of the border, they're starting to not care about. And I think we need to just come out and tell people that that is what it is. Don't hide that, because I think that will sell us to the world, right? Like, we need to show who we truly are. And use that to our advantage, use that in our marketing, like all Canadian companies should come out and be like, these are our values. This is what we stand for. And you should work for us or with us because we're better, right? And I know we don't want to be in the shadow of Americans and only define ourselves by what, we're not either. But I think there is an opportunity here on the table to take advantage of, the fact that we're not who those guys are and they're not trusted as much as we are at this point. So let's go out and publish that to the world.
Yeah, I think some of the pieces that I'm hearing kind of crystallize is that, we're a values-based society. That's what pulls us together, regardless of where you come from, who you are, and what you're about. It's the shared values that we hold that imbue us as a nation, which sometimes doesn't seem necessarily as clear as maybe, a nationality or identity based off of, a common language or a common history. But a values-based society is a profoundly strong one, and that allows all to participate in it, which is, I think, what we as Canadians, really hold dear. We are in an election, and I'm not going to put anyone on the spot about who they're voting for, who they're supporting, or anything like that. But, having conversations right now for us is really critical at the council. Looking and assessing at, who does have some policies and ideas around how to, increase access to capital, or, how to mobilize and bring folks to this country from a talent perspective, or looking at areas of access to customers and government procurement, I think has kind of been also the ding, ding, ding on this conversation as well. And then also things like, how to negotiate trade agreements and freedom to operate in other areas. We have seen, a positive announcement that Sean mentioned around kind of cap gains and how to keep that money flowing through. But I'm curious if there are other things that you've heard, either on the campaign trail that you think might be something good for your sector or for your firm. And if you haven't, then, what are some things that you're wanting to hear? And how do we help bubble that up into the discourse and the conversation as an organization and as an ecosystem?
And I paying attention to the federal, the major Carney Poilievre camps. Sometimes, and we see this coming out of Ontario and some of our provinces as well, the message is a strong pushback. It's a strong short-term reaction to the tariff situation. And, I like that posture. I do like that we are, bold when we need to be and unapologetic about that. I think that's good. But I'm also looking to hear the longer-term strategic stance as well. And the fact is that the US represents a very large customer base for us. It is a very large and critical market. And again, I know I keep coming back to defense, but that's my arena. And I'm quite cognizant not only of the importance of that allyship on a defense front, but also the opportunity. Defense historically presents a lot of innovation opportunities, a lot of investments that drive the next wave of industrial growth. And I think going forward, we're going to have to recognize the immediate concerns of tariffs and how we respond to them and how we push back, but also the long-term strategic piece whereby we stay good neighbors with each other. So I'm hoping to hear more of that from our two governments, and not just that immediate, we'll fight back.
Yeah, how do you move past the rhetoric into the nitty gritty of it? And that's hard to obviously display in campaigns. But some of the stuff we're working on is kind of the post campaign at the council, and really, building a platform that any of the parties can plug into based off of the language that's been communicated. Thanks, Gina, for that piece. Anyone else want to jump in on this one? What are you hearing? What are you wanting to hear?
Hey, Ben, it's Josh here from ABSS. We do dual use drone robotic technologies, commercial, military. But has anyone ever just approached different representatives and discussed about front loading shred? So instead of putting out all these finances and causing future inflation, like right now I'm 6 months into my year, I could have 300,000-400,000 of shred. I could go obviously try to get it from the venture debt guys, pay them 20%, or I could strategically just change my year end to get access to it quickly. But why don't we have a the ability to get front loaded. If I've got 8 years of history of shred receiving and there's numbers there, like why hasn't anyone approached the government about revisiting shred and using that as a tool to put out money faster without incurring new capital debt that they would have to incur?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just jump in on that one. 100%. That is definitely something, we've actually, pitched to the federal government, and we had a shred document that we started 5 years ago and has been iterated and brought up to speed a number of times. We actually had a lot of the policies that we had put in place confirmed by the Liberal government in December, just before the fall economic statement. If folks remember in their Wayback Machine, sort of the high drama that occurred around Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland resigning, the week before, she'd actually given an announcement that the council was invited to, and was a number of the recommendations that we had given, and that front loading was definitely a piece of it, Josh. There was others as well, from a simplification of application forms and not having to do duplication. So there was a whole issue on implementation, and then for us there was also the value perspective, right? 18,000 companies receive shred dollars, and a tremendous amount of them that are foreign multinationals receive about 50% of every shred dollar that goes out. So it's about $2 billion a year. From a values perspective as well, and I think this speaks to a lot of the conversation we've had so far, is that even firms like Huawei were still receiving shred dollars up until 2021, 2022, meaning we're subsidizing the R&D of a company that we don't actually view we should be using their technology, but are happy to fund it. So Josh, that's definitely something that we'll continue to push for. And on the shred piece in particular, the work's already been done by the bureaucracy on our proposal. So it's just sitting there as something that actually can move forward. And so regardless of who gets elected, one of the things, to note that we'll push hard on is those reforms. And I don't know if one of the lovely CCI team members wants to throw it in the chat of what those recommendations are, but you can definitely find it on our website. But we'll throw it in there as well so people can have a look. Panelists, what are you wanting to hear, and or what have you heard that you think might be a positive step, or maybe a concern? We don't always have to be rosy on these things.
I think we've spent 8 years talking to a party in power who would shake their head, nod their heads, acknowledge they heard us, and then actually do nothing to demonstrate that we were at least speaking clearly and giving them fair ideas. One thing I love about CCI is I don't feel like we're very self-serving in our feedback to the parties. So, I mean, I haven't heard really anything substantial other than a couple of pronouncements, which are just gamesmanship, I suppose. But I worry about that. I worry about 4 more years of, of being listened to but not really heard, and certainly no action. And I don't know who they're listening to. Like, I just don't know. Do the Conservatives have the engine? Do they have the staffers in place to actually be different, or would it be more of the same?
Maybe I think what's different this time around is I think the entire country, the general populace is really awake, and you're seeing that in the boycotts. You're seeing them in the way that they're even looking at their groceries and making personal sacrifices and changes that like usually is really hard to get out of a general, I think, population, right? People get comfortable in the way they do things. So I think that there's a Canadian patriotism that's really woken up, and I'm hoping that I think the best thing that can happen is for that to continue for the foreseeable future. And I think that puts it, when we are dealing with the government and pushing for changes in policy, and pushing for them to open up trade barriers, and pushing for them to fix procurement and really take this seriously. I think that what will be different this time is that there'll be a wind behind our back that will make them really realize that like they are in the wrong unless they are making that change. Never underestimate the power of shame to drive change. And I think I'm very hopeful that regardless of which government, we're gonna have a better audience, and we just need to keep that patriotism up.
If I can add, Benjamin, I think that unfortunately this campaign is polluted by like a manufacturing narrative, like we're back to the 50s. And of course, this is a big worry, but innovation is a little bit behind the scenes, and we don't talk about it too much, but it is the remedy to build a vibrant economy. It is where it comes from. Before you make a car, you have to invent it. And this is something I find unfortunate. We fall into that trap. And I understand why, don't get me wrong, because this is a worry, but I would like to hear more about bold solutions. How do we in Canada become the next economy in North America, the place to be in North America? We don't hear so much about that, like we're tiptoeing around like post-World War II questions. And that really makes me worried about the long-term plan for this country, because whether or not he stays for 4 years or, our neighbor or more, we need to think like we are in an economy of knowledge, not in an economy of making things. And so this is my worry. We don't hear not enough about innovation.
Yeah,
on all
and I
fronts.
think from just to kind of continue on that thread around innovation, and we started this off with the discussion around AI and how this whole thing affects, like how is it connected to AI in any way? If you look at all of the bigger players in the realm of AI and data, they're all US firms today. And so one of the things that we really need to push for is data sovereignty. We have and knowledge sovereignty. So when our organizations, our enterprises like financial services, government, etc., we use OpenAI and we use XAI and Anthropic, Perplexity. All of these companies are essentially taking your data and learning from it and making their models better. So all of our knowledge and our expertise is actually now going into the brains of those models that are sitting in the US. So we need to do something about, really putting some capital into homegrown AI companies as well, so that we can keep our data here, we can keep our knowledge, the learning from all of that data in-house as well, and that will lead to economic sovereignty and freedom as well.
It's such good points being made, Hélène. I couldn't agree more. It feels like we're rolling the clock backwards in so many ways, and I think it presents an opportunity for Canada to really differentiate ourselves from that current thinking that I don't know about the rest of you, but I've certainly seen that kind of posture, that US or Trump posture, come to tables around me, and it's really concerning me, and certainly on a DEI front as well. And I just wanted to kind of finish my comments by putting a plug in for CCI's governance program. I think this is a massive opportunity right now to increase governance, and because we multiply our impact. If we have boards behind us, we multiply the scaling up of our companies and the breadth and the impact of them, but we also multiply the impact of the messaging. And I think right now it's a time for Canada to employ a whole bunch of different options, but one of a big piece, and certainly in the tech sector, is more governance.
Thanks, Gina, for that piece. Folks, we are very, very close to being wrapped here. Nic, Craig, is there any final pieces that you wanted to throw on there before I wrap it and let people go on with their day?
Well, I'll just take what Gina said and say that the one voice that we speak with as members of CCI is super important. And I would encourage everyone to get out there and deliver that message. I did a CBC interview on the radio last week. I don't know if some of you got a chance to hear that. Every one of you are capable of doing one of those a week. And if we really truly believe what Nic said, and I do, the voices have to come from us. We can't wait for the politicians to speak. And if we're talking about it a lot in a fair and honest approach, we will eventually be heard. But we're it. I don't see any other people doing what we're doing. So good on you, Ben. But I want to encourage you to challenge everyone else to get out there too.
Thanks, Craig. Nic?
Yeah, I think it's making sure that we don't waste this moment. I think it really is like, let's turn it into our opportunity. Let's not let a crisis go to waste, and let's just be the Canada that we want to be. Let's be audacious, and let's be loud, and let's be bold.
Great. Well, look, I think that this is a really great place for us to kind of conclude on, and very much agree with the elements of the discussion that we've had today. You know, we are the response to this, right? It is us collectively coming together that will solve it. It's a small group of people coming together that have solved, you know, all the major problems of the world and activating people around it. There was a Margaret Mead quote in there, but I totally forgot it, so apologies. It's kind of but look, CCI is going to stay on top of obviously this issue and this file, and it continues to evolve, making sure that we're engaging, you know, the cities, the province, and the federal government, and that as we near the election date, making sure that what comes next, regardless of who is in power, helps really solidify our opportunity to build a prosperous society through innovation, through ideas, and through the ownership of them. And that we don't continue to have, you know, 1950s conversations around where things are structured. So thank you all for your time. Please reach out, and more of this to come in the next weeks and months ahead. So take care, everyone.
Well
Thanks,
done.
Ben.
Bye.
Bye-bye.